Thanks for joining us for another episode of Cyber Spotlight. We are here today to be joined by Buu Lam. Very happy to have you, Buu. Thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, if you could just explain to the audience who you are and who you work for and kind of what your job is, and then a little bit about how you got into the cyber field to start with.
Yeah, sounds good. So as you said, my name is Buu Lam. My job currently at F5 is I'm a solutions engineer. So basically, with companies like ours, there's a sales team that is managing accounts, and so I work in the BC territory. I work with the sales rep here, and between the two of us, we go speak to our customers for F5, and I'm the technical side of the conversation. So when people are evaluating a product like F5, they need to understand how that fits in their environment, what kind of value does it bring, how does it compare to other solutions out there. And so I'm there to explain that to them and help them through that process and answer any questions for them. F5 itself is a company around application delivery. And so we're kind of the nuts and bolts. You don't really see us in the limelight. Like it's, when you go to a website, you don't necessarily know that it's running an F5 out there. But rest assured, F5 is actually powering a majority of the internet between the products that we have on the big IP side of things and actually something called Nginx, which is the most widely deployed web server in the world. So we're out there quite a bit. We're kind of behind the scenes, but we make sure applications are fast, highly available, and secure. As far as how I got into cybersecurity, I guess I've been in cybersecurity maybe for about 15 years at this point. Maybe at the point where it wasn't called cybersecurity, it was just called security for the network. And I was on the perspective of the network side. So I went to school at BCIT for networking, and I came out of that, and I got a job and found my way into the network side of things. And anytime you're on the network side of things, I think you inherently work yourself into working with firewalls. And so I was doing that, and I worked at a consulting company, and I did that for a while. And so my title at that point was a consultant for networking and security products. So anything on the security side at that company kind of fell into my lap. And at that point, we called it security. But
Right.
for the most part, that would be what everybody would know as cybersecurity today.
Interesting. Yeah, it's cool to have seen that transition to obviously where cyber and the internet and security on that front is obviously a massive front for all businesses. If you had to explain your job to somebody in an elevator, maybe you only had like 15, 20 seconds, what would you tell somebody that you did?
I would tell folks, and my kids ask me this often because they still don't quite understand, but basically, I need to be able to take complex ideas and complex products and then be able to explain them to somebody who's never heard of it before and really quickly show them why it provides value in their environment, and then hopefully get them to take action on that and go ahead and purchase the product and have it and use it in their environment and enjoy it as well. The whole life cycle, I want to make sure that anybody who has our product is getting full value out of that. So that's part of my job as well.
Cool. Yeah, makes sense. Since COVID started, there's obviously been a lot of changes. Has there been any changes to how your job functions or the things that you monitor on the cybersecurity front?
Yeah, I would say on the cybersecurity front, we've noticed that overall there's a lot more activity these days. There's a lot more attacks that are happening, and people are on high alert for that kind of stuff. I think some of the products that we deal with on the web application firewall side of things, we're seeing that implemented a lot more. We're seeing things around credential stuffing. I think there's just a lot of very smart but bored people at home, and some of them are doing nefarious things, and so that's changed a lot in the past year.
Right. And you talk about credentials, problems with that. Like obviously with people working at home now for the majority of professionals with their, whether they used to use business controlled devices, now it's BYOD. That's probably had a lot to play into that, hey, with as far as credentials go as well, and those types of attacks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we saw a very quick adoption of SaaS applications. I mean, before COVID, we were seeing SaaS applications being adopted quite rapidly. One of the things that we deal with is single sign-on capabilities, and so we saw a lot of people adopt that. But I think as people move into BYOD model, There's going to just be more applications that are going to be free and out there, out on the open internet. There's zero trust architectures as well. And so identity and management of those identities and management of passwords has become super important these days.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, that's at Plurilock. Obviously, we work a lot with that, so we agree. What would you tell somebody who is looking to get into the line of work that you're in, or a job like yours?
Yeah, that's a great question. Sometimes I wonder myself how I got into this role, and it kind of felt right at the time. I think a lot of people, if they just do the things that they love, they'll find their way into something that fits them. And for me, I enjoy talking to people, interacting with people, and I also enjoy technology. And so for me, coming from a background of just working, on the ground floor with the technology, and then being somebody who's personable and just enjoys talking to people, I found myself into a technical sales role. I would say if you're coming out of school, looking for opportunities that might not be obvious is what I would recommend. In that, the first job that I had was not something that I thought I would be doing. I thought I came out of school, I want to do network engineering type stuff, and I ended up doing a help desk role. And that it made sense at the time to move into that role because it was a big company and I learned a lot of stuff. And from there, I went on to a company that wasn't so big, and I wasn't too sure if that would work out, but it ended up being a job where I was one of few, and that gave me an opportunity to have a lot of freedom to make my own choices, to influence the company, and that made all the difference in my career. So I would recommend to folks, it's great to see, and especially in Vancouver, we got Microsoft and Amazon and Facebook has offices here. And so those are really great shiny roles, but look for those roles with the smaller companies because you're going to find a lot of diamonds in the rough, especially in Victoria and Vancouver.
Yeah, interesting. Do you feel that role at a help desk really helped you in your communication skills that might benefit you now when you're in kind of like a part sales, part technical role?
Yeah, definitely that kind of customer service experience where, when you're in help desk, people are calling you because they're frustrated with something. Usually people aren't calling you to say, hey, great job, and then hang up. They're calling you because something's wrong with their computer, and it's desk side support in the job that I was doing at the time. And so you roll up to somebody's desk, and they're probably ready to throw their mouse on the ground and stomp away and stuff. And so you can kind of work through and help them through their issue. And then at the same time, because you're with somebody and spending time with them, you just get to know them a bit more. So that was a really fun job at that company, just getting
Yeah.
to know all sorts of people and interacting with them and making their day better by fixing their issues.
Yeah, right on. With so Plurilock's an identity centric company. How does identity play into your vision of cybersecurity, or what role does it play in cybersecurity at large?
Oh, that's a great question. It's going to play into everything going forward. I actually, well, there's two parts to this. Identity itself and what it unlocks is really important in that I think we're, whether or not people think it's a buzzword or not, zero trust and moving towards that model of applications being accessible from anywhere, and then the access to that application depends entirely on your identity and the context around your request. So who you are and proving who you are, and then having rights based on who you are, super important going forward. So I would say that's going to be one of the centerpieces when it comes to cybersecurity. On the flip side of that, I just had a conversation with somebody who works in the video game space with avatars. And so the representation of your digital self has become really important too. So not just what your person has available to them as far as resources that tie you to doing your job, but just how you look. Right now we don't have any sort of filters on or anything over Zoom, but you can add that if you wanted to. But creating your own personality and just identifying yourself affects how you interact with other people in business as well. So yeah, in two ways, I think identity is going to be really important over the next 5 years, and now essentially.
Yeah, for sure. It's hugely important, and those are really good points. You were telling me before the interview that F5, like a lot of companies, had a product vulnerability recently, and you just wanted to share a bit about how you guys handled it from a PR standpoint, and give some maybe tips and best practices to the audience.
Yeah, I would say this is a subject that, as I thought through it, I was really proud of how F5 acted through this. And first, I'll preface this by saying I'm not from PR or anything, and I'm not somebody from our CERT team, and so there's a lot of inner workings to how a vulnerability is announced that I won't have the authority to speak on. But what I can speak on is my experience through it. And so we had vulnerabilities that were released back in March, and they were of the high and critical severity levels, which is very serious. And for most of our clients out there, they recognize that and they know that there's going to be some repercussions, whether they need to put in effort to get their devices upgraded or whatever it might be for mitigations. From an F5 perspective, I was pretty proud of how we were handled the disclosure. So we are just trying to put out as much information as possible. And from my perspective, I was a part of that. So I was part of something called open office hours, which was multiple sessions daily, multiple times a day, just going out on Zoom, inviting customers in. And we had our CERT team, our security incident response team available there. And we just took questions for an hour and a half. Any question you want to ask, anything. We might not be able to answer certain things, but it's anybody can fire any question at us, and we will put out as many answers as possible in that time frame until everybody's done, and then we publish those afterwards publicly as well, so that people can kind of get didn't have to attend that session to get some of the value out of that. I'll also say that we also had all of our patches ready to go at the day of the release of the vulnerabilities as well, or many of them were actually patched ahead of time. But we took the opportunity. If you were to read into this vulnerability or these vulnerabilities, they were discovered by Google Project Zero, which is a responsible disclosure program. And so they give you a window in order to fix and release the vulnerability. And so that time was used. It was very valuable to get all that stuff done. And then, at the day of, we released the vulnerability and, whatever details need to be released around that. And that was good. And I see, I'm not going to call out anybody specifically, but we see some companies out there that for whatever reason, they haven't been able to meet the deadline for responsible disclosure, or they didn't have patches ready. And I don't know what their situation might be. There might be a good reason that it was just really difficult to tackle the issues or whatever. But I think as an industry, that's something, what F5 has been able to do with the last set of vulnerabilities is something that hopefully the entire industry strives to do, releasing things responsibly with disclosure, and then just being as transparent as possible so that people can do what they need to do, and then helping them along the way.
Yeah, well, transparency is, like you said, it's a huge thing. And even the fact that you're talking about it right now to the public is a big thing. Props to you and to F5 for being transparent about it. And yeah, if a company were to get breached or find a vulnerability in a product and feature, what would be like a couple of just basic tips you would give them, like to do, like sure things to do to help gain or help keep that customer report and credibility going forward?
Yeah, we were very proactive as soon as we saw the vulnerabilities announced. At least from my perspective, and our between myself and the account manager that I work with, emails went out right away to all of our customers, and just ready at the phone to pick up anytime anybody had anything that they wanted to talk through. They're working through upgrades. They need to be able to call support. They need more information on this. They need to understand how to do their updates. So just providing as much information as possible. I was answering emails basically till midnight or 1 or 2 a.m. that day, and most of the next day as well, and then being part of those open office hours. Being forthcoming and having as much information ready for people as possible is what I can say. It's not a great situation. Nobody wants to be in that situation. So just doing whatever you can to just mitigate it and making it easy, because it's hard for us, but it's also hard for the customers, and we're empathetic towards that. So we need to do everything that we can to make their process as smooth as possible.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Yeah, so to close off this interview, a little fun, this or that game, just know a little bit more about Boo. Are you a cat person or dog person?
I have both, and they're both interesting in multiple ways. I would say I'm more of a dog person, though. I think being able to walk well, you can walk a cat, but I don't see a lot of that. But you can walk a dog, so at least you can get outside and do some exercising.
Fair enough. Man's best friend. PC or Mac?
I am a Mac guy. A friend of mine just asked me for some tips on building a PC, and it's been way too long for me to comment on that. And Macs, for me, just work, and for my family, just work, which is important when you're working from home and you're the IT guy for your family. You need things that just work.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Standing desk or sitting desk or coffee shop? What's your go-to?
You know, pre-pandemic, I was in a lot of coffee shops doing emails from there. At home, I do have a sit-stand desk, and 80% of the time, I would say it's sitting, but I do like to have it standing as well. You can see this. This is actually a cloud light back here,
Yep.
and you can only really see it if I have it in a standing position.
Interesting. Netflix or YouTube?
YouTube, yeah. Shout out to myself. You can check me out on YouTube on the channel that I've been running, trying to communicate with customers.
Perfect. What's that channel called?
It's called Daryl and Boo. So if you just head over to youtube.com/Daryl and Boo, you'll find all of our content on there.
Perfect. And finally, I feel like I already know the answer to this because of a previous question, but iOS or Android?
Yeah, I definitely iOS. I tried Android for a little bit, and again, there's ultimate flexibility, but it was flexibility that I didn't need. So I'm way more on the iOS side.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your expertise. If people want to reach out and connect with you, where can they find your show on the internet and just the ability to connect with you in general?
Yeah, the content stuff that I've been producing is all on YouTube, so youtube.com/Daryl and Boo. But most people find me on LinkedIn. That's where I have the most amount of interaction with folks. I have Twitter and all the other things as well, but I would say LinkedIn is probably, at least for business hours, is where I'll be checking most.
Cool. Sounds good. Well, thanks for joining us, Boo. Really appreciate it, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks for having me.